Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the National School of Government. Today we are running a third webinar with Microsoft ever since we have signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the Microsoft. So we've been running these webinars. So this one for today is focusing on the AI for policy development. And the really aim behind this, colleagues, is to ensure that we actually enable enabling the upskilling, reskilling, and also empowering the lifelong learning. We want to understand basically how are this technology going to help us in order to execute our mandate expeditiously. So also part of it is to ensure that we are learning from each other. We are giving each other some part of the deep dive into how do we enable the things that can actually assist us. As we know that part of the mandate of the NSG is to actually build a capable ethical state. As we are in the digital era, we want to understand more about the AI. So let me allow my colleague Trevor Jones to take the stage as to he will actually take us through the entire part about the AI for policy development and for curriculum design. Please note, colleagues, that the chat button is actually not enabled. However, we have a Q&A button that is enabled. So you are welcome to actually ask any questions as we will take those through. But also Trevor will enable the part where actually he will actually allow us to answer the questions and be able to answer those. So for me saying that, let me give it over to Trevor. Trevor, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation with you. If I can just confirm that my screen is currently being shared. Is that correct?
Yes, you are. You may continue.
You should see.
We have it on the timer.
Yes, that's the timer is exactly where I am. Okay. So I'm going to tackle this presentation perhaps in 2 or 3 different stages. The first stage is going to talk generally about artificial intelligence. It will be a relatively short chat. The second stage, I think, is going to be demonstrating the capabilities of a variety of different AI tools. And the third stage, I think, is where I'm going to try to bring everything together, and we can talk a little bit about how we can use AI tools and artificial intelligence in general to assist us with policy development and in particular curriculum development. This is a Microsoft session, so predominantly I'm going to be using Microsoft technology and Microsoft tools. However, there are situations and there are cases where I will perhaps use some of the other artificial intelligence tools just to expand our way of thinking so that we're not caught up in just thinking that there's only one form of artificial intelligence available to us. So what I'm going to do is I have my video camera on, but you will typically see that my head swivels from side to side quite a lot. Reason being that I have multiple monitors and I'm trying to keep an eye on not only the status of the chat, but the status of the Q&A. I'm trying to focus on the screen that I'm sharing with you and so forth. So if you don't mind, what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and disable my video camera. I'm going to look the same throughout the presentation. So I don't think there's really a need for you to see me. If it is a problem or if you prefer to see me all of the time, I'm happy to re-enable my video camera. You'll just see my head swiveling around quite a lot. All right. So I think the best thing to do is just to get going and start. And the way that I think I'm going to start is let's just talk a little bit about artificial intelligence in general. As a matter of fact, I have a little PowerPoint presentation that I created specifically for this. You know, I'm not a Microsoft PowerPoint guru, so you would probably be able to see that I used AI to create this PowerPoint presentation. That's one of the use cases for generative AI to begin with. In this presentation, honestly, it's not going to take us that long to work through. It's more about a review of some of the terms and terminology that you've probably encountered and that you have probably had presentations about before, but perhaps not in the same format. So this is part 1. Part 2, remember, I think I said we would look at a couple of examples of how we could use AI tools. And part 3, we will bring everything together for policy generation and in particular curriculum development. So there's a couple of topics that I want to cover under part one. Topic number one, of course, look, I'm not such a big fan of using PowerPoint because people tend to read the PowerPoint instead of talking about the key points. So you'll hardly find that I'm going to read the PowerPoint. It's probably more just something that I use to stimulate ideas. But there's part one. You can quickly scan through part one. I'll highlight a couple of things there. We have to start somewhere. So we're going to start with the idea of big data. I'm confident you've encountered the term and the terminology before. Perhaps I can give you some practical examples of big data and why it's referred to as big data. We're going to move over to NLP, or natural language processing, and the ideas behind NLP is for some type of artificial system to be able to interact and understand human language. There are a lot of nuances in human language, and maybe what we want to do is we want to see if artificial intelligence can differentiate between those nuances. Nuances such as language itself, whether it's English, Afrikaans, German, French, and whether it can kind of understand the different types of accents that people might have. Then we want to do a very brief talk about machine learning, the ins and outs of machine learning. We'll go over to deep learning, generative AI, large language models. And then something that I think is going to be key for us in developing content using generative AI is understanding prompting. Prompting is effectively the way in which we ask questions from a generative AI system so that we get an appropriate response. Prompting really has a big influence on the result that you get. People always laugh at me when it comes to prompts because I tend to be quite polite, and I tend to say please and thank you, and I tend to criticize the results of the AI tool in a constructive way rather than a destructive way. People always laugh at that, but that really does have an impact in the result that you receive. So we'll talk about that briefly. Maybe it'll be maybe 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on the level of interaction that I get. So the first idea that I have over here is the idea of big data. Big data is typically defined as data that I think the best description of that would be large and complex sets of data. And the reason it's referred to as big data is not only because of the size and the complexity, but also associated with the difficulty of processing that data, because traditional data processing methods don't necessarily work effectively for big data. So the example that I would use is, imagine if you had to count every grain of sand on a beach using your hands, right? I mean, that's an impossible task. That's what working with big data is like. There's just so much of it, and it keeps growing, not every day or every hour, but it keeps growing every second. There's a couple of key characteristics associated with big data, and these are typically referred to as the V's of big data. So they talk about volume and velocity and variety of data. So initially, big data was associated with the 3 V's of big data, but I think in the modern world we've gone beyond the 3 V's, and we're probably talking about the 6 or 7 V's of big data. So volume is just basically the amount of data that we have. The terabytes, if not petabytes of data. Or even beyond. Examples thereof would be social media posts and sensor data and transactional data. The second V is velocity, speed at which we are collecting data, speed at which the data is being generated, collected, processed, and then analyzed. Data is continuously growing, and much of the data is growing in real time. And then the variety of the data is just, different types of data sources. I think if we stick to the 3 V's, I think that's good enough. But just to mention that there are some other V's associated with big data as well. I mean, we're talking about veracity, value, and variability, and so forth. A very good example of big data is a flight data recorder. right. So there are a couple of examples that you can have a look at, but in particular, a flight data recorder. And the reason a flight data recorder stood out to me is because it certainly adheres to the 3 Vs, if not the 7 Vs of big data. But not so long ago, I had the privilege of flying over to I had the privilege of flying over to Morocco, as a matter of fact, via Paris, believe it or not. And I was on the plane for I think it was probably about 9-10 hours. And while I was flying, I was thinking about the flight data recorder. I'm a nervous flyer, so I'm always thinking about an accident occurring and whether anybody would ever be able to understand why the accident occurred. And of course, the flight data recorder popped into mind. Did a little bit of research, and with a flight data recorder, in a 30-minute period of time, you're probably generating about 10 terabytes of data in a 30-minute flight. So in a 10-hour flight, if you do the math quickly, you're going to find that a huge volume of data is being recorded. And the type of data would be voice recordings, it would be sensor data, it would be telemetry data. All of that information is going to be recorded by the flight data recorder on a single flight. How many flights occur on a daily basis for an airline? All of that data needs to be analyzed. All of the results need to be made available. And so on. And that's the idea of big data. So if you'll allow me a second, I know that sometimes I tend to go a little bit crazy when it comes to drawing diagrams, but I think it is appropriate for me just to draw a quick little diagram so that we can see the relationship between the different topics that I'm going to be talking about. All right, so on the outer edge over here, we'll describe that as big data. I think the idea here is that artificial intelligence is useless without big data. If we're thinking about analyzing big data, we're thinking in terms of machine learning algorithms, so that we can identify patterns. We're thinking in terms of deep learning algorithms, so that we can analyze the variety of different types of data, so that we can extract the tone of the voice, so that we can extract from video the important, maybe there's a video that we want to extract facial recognition from, or we want to extract nefarious behavior or potential nefarious behavior at an airport. So those are some of the methods that I would use to go ahead and interrogate this big data. But without big data, AI cannot be trained, and AI cannot be asked to provide us with some type of prediction. So some people don't like the idea that my outer ring is big data, but honestly, without big data, we really have nothing. We honestly really have nothing. Okay, so where to? Apologies, I'm just trying to keep track of what I'm doing. Okay, so where to from here? So that's a quick review of big data, and I'm pretty confident we can move speedily on. And moving speedily on, the second thing I want to talk about is the idea of natural language processing. So natural language processing is, briefly mentioned it before, is really the idea that we want to have computers understand, interpret, and respond to human language, just like we're chatting right now, just like we're chatting right now. So think of NLP as the technology that allows machines to read and listen and talk in a way that makes sense to humans. It's like teaching a computer to understand what we mean when we speak or write. Practical examples thereof, there are many practical examples thereof, and I'll give you one or two now. But typically a voice assistant like Siri or Alexa or one of those types of AI assistants running on your mobile device. What's the weather like? Or play my favorite song. whether you are typing it or whether you're speaking it, we would like our AI assistant to be able to interpret that. It's often used for things like spam detection as well. Also text prediction, and it's very often and commonly used as part of a search engine. So if I were to try and think of an example thereof, I think I have my browser open over here, and for this I'm just going to use something like Microsoft Copilot, and many AI tools I could of course use, but for Microsoft Copilot, let's see if we can ask it a question. Right. Okay, let me just get my Copilot window over here. Let's just grab hold of Copilot, and then we'll just ask Copilot a simple little question, or whichever AI tool we prefer. So I'm quite fond of Microsoft Copilot. However, there are, of course, many AI tools available for us to ask questions from. So let's see. Whoops, that's not quite where I want to be. Or we'll just open up a browser and we'll just ask Copilot a question like that. I might have to open up a private window quickly, but we'll see how it goes. And there's quite a lot of complexity associated with what I've just done. Afrikaans is my first language. I can honestly, my English is not as good as it should be. So Copilot was able to not only identify the language that I spoke, translate the language, but Copilot was also able to come back and give me an answer in the language that I spoke. Imagine the complexity associated with that. And that's the idea of natural language processing. It's just quite simple, being able to not only read, listen, but also talk in a way that makes sense to humans. Is daar iets spesifieks waarmee ek kan help? That's pretty good for Afrikaans. Let's see if we can do something like let's see if we can do something like that. It's Duits and beteken wat is dit? I mean that's pretty amazing. So this means that I can use the natural language processing function on any mobile device when visiting a foreign country. I would be able to use the interpreter function thereof, not only to translate my language into the language where I'm visiting, but also translate the language of the country that I'm visiting into my language. Right. So that's the idea of natural language processing. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about natural language processing is because a fundamental concept associated with artificial intelligence, of course, is being able to understand human language. If we consider that artificial intelligence is trying to simulate being a human being or being able to respond like a human being would, of course, it would need to be able to understand human language to do exactly that. Whether it is text-based or whether it is voice recognition is really irrelevant. I think that in most circumstances, most of the AI tools that we have available will have a little dictate function and a little dictate function where I can actually speak to the system. I'll try my best to demonstrate that functionality for us in a few minutes' time. So where do we end up? So AI cannot exist without big data, right? And AI cannot exist without the ability of a machine to interpret and understand human language, and of course, being able to respond in the form of human language. And we refer to that as NLP, or natural language processing. This is going to be important for us a little bit later, because often when it comes to policy development or curriculum development, and certainly when it comes to me wanting to write a research paper or needing to mark a research paper, If I have 100 students submitting a research paper, I'm honestly, I'm not going to be marking the 100 students' research papers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to feed those 100 research papers via natural language processing model to an AI system, and the AI system is going to do the marking for me. Right? It will be able to read, it will be able to interpret, it will be able to understand, and the more research papers it marks, the better it will become at marking research papers. So there's a great example of using natural language processing. Without it, there's a combination of natural language processing, machine learning, and deep learning. But without the natural language processing function, it will not be able to interpret the human speech. And an interesting experiment that I performed is I had two artificial intelligence systems communicate with each other. And as soon as they realized they were artificial intelligence systems, they started to speak their own language, which of course I could not interpret. So I thought that would just be interesting to mention. All right, next on my agenda over here is, now that we understand a little bit about natural language processing, we should talk about machine learning. Right. And very quickly, of course, I have to add a cat. You know that any presentation will be successful if you add a cat to it. So what is machine learning? So machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence that allows computers to learn from data, but not only learn from data, but also improve their performance over time, without us programming them explicitly for every task that needs to be performed. So in simple terms, think of a child, and think of a child that we want the child to be able to recognize animals. So what we do is we show them pictures of cats, we show them pictures of dogs. In technical terms, we call that labeled data. And over time, they learn to tell the difference. Machine learning works in a very similar way. We feed a computer lots of examples, and it learns to make predictions or decisions based on that data. Right? Of course, it's not only associated with images. A large part thereof, I guess, is, but it's not only associated with images, it's also associated with more practical examples like email spam filters, or if I work in a cybersecurity environment. So in a cybersecurity environment, I would typically have an intrusion detection device. So not to be too technical, but an intrusion detection device looks at the network traffic that flows through it. And over time, it learns what valid traffic looks like, and any kind of deviation from that valid pattern will then be highlighted, and perhaps the highlighting thereof will cause some type of reaction to take place. The reaction might be to prevent that data from ingressing or egressing your network. So there's a really practical example of machine learning. Another practical example thereof is predicting a pattern. So I'm just going to grab hold, I think, of one of my Copilot tools over here. And let's just grab hold of that tool over there. And what we'll do is we'll present our Copilot. We'll present it with a pattern, and we'll ask it to make a prediction. So this is kind of an illustration of machine learning functionality. A good pattern, I guess, would be something like zero. Oh, let's try this. Predict the next value, right? And explain why this is the next value. Let's try that. And let's give it a range of values. So we'll start with 0, and we'll go to 0, and then we'll do like 1, and then we'll do like, shall we try a 2, and then we'll do like a 3, and then we'll do like a 5, and then we'll do like a 8, and then we'll do like a, I guess, a 13, and let's see if we can predict what the next value is. Okay, so it looks like it was able to identify it as a Fibonacci sequence, but in case it starts with, okay, 0 and 0, of course, And okay, it looks like there's a great explanation as well and why that would be the next value. That's effectively machine learning in action. Machine learning is fed something, and based on the analysis of what we feed it, it was able to make a prediction. Perhaps another good example of machine learning would be if I were to add some content. I've gone ahead and of course, with any presentation, I try my best to prepare for the presentation. So what I want to do over here is I just want to attach a file quickly and see if it can tell me about that particular file. So if I just browse for a file quickly, I've got a good couple of files available. And I'm not quite sure which one it is I want, but um, okay, perhaps I should just browse for it on my computer rather than from the cloud. So if I just go add content and we'll upload it from my device. And then what we'll do is let's take that image over there. So this is a fictitious image. This is a fictitious map. It is not a map that was part of planet Earth, so to speak. But let's see if it has the ability to identify that particular image. All right. So we'll say, where is the attached image from? And please provide a summary thereof. All right. So I'm an avid reader, and this image comes from a series of books that I've read or am still busy reading. And it was able to take the image, identify the characteristics associated with the image, and predict that it came from a specific series of books. And this is pretty accurate, simply based on the content of the image. This is machine learning, a practical example of machine learning in action. Now, how does this relate to anything associated with perhaps curriculum development or education? Let's take it a step further, and let's use machine learning to help us answer a question. Or at least I hope to get it to answer a question for me. So for this, I guess I haven't told you, but I work extensively with network appliances, routers, switches, intrusion detection devices, application firewalls, and things like that. And I do a lot of training associated with that. And very often, as part of the training, I like to stimulate conversation by asking questions. Unfortunately, today we're not doing training. I only have you for 3 hours. Can't train much in 3 hours. But let me illustrate how I could use artificial intelligence to help me present my students with a question and explain why a particular answer exists. Right. So this is going to be machine learning in action. So there's the question. So if I just scroll a little bit, the question is quite complex. It says refer to an IP table. I guess the details thereof isn't that important. It's the result that's important. So there's an IP routing table, and there's and on the following, refer to the following IP routing table. But there is no IP routing table. But what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've taken a screenshot of one of my routers. And I'm going to present it with an image that contains the routing information that I'm asking a question about. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best just to paste the image in over there. Okay, there's the image.png. And then what I'll do is let's see if we get a result. So this is going to illustrate the machine learning capability behind the scenes, because it's trying to recognize characters. It's trying to convert an image. It's a PNG, typical image or a web image, and it's trying to convert that to text. And not only is it trying to convert that to text, it's also trying to use that text as part of the question. Now, imagine the capability that this is going to give you, anybody who acts as a facilitator, anybody who acts as a trainer, two different things, of course, or anybody that is going to be a lecturer. Not only do we have the ability to ask questions, but we also have the ability with machine learning to be able to see if the answers that we were presented with are indeed correct. Now, I'm a little bit of a network guru. So not that there's any such thing as, although having said that there's anything such as a guru, these days everybody can be a guru. Honestly, if you know how to ask the question and what question to ask of an AI service, you will be able to get the appropriate answer. So in this case, if I were to look at the image over there, 10.32 means all the bits are covered, which means that it's a specific IP address, so it should go out over Ethernet 001. And if I scroll down, it predicted the appropriate answer. There's machine learning in action. So where does machine learning fit into the grander scheme of things? Machine learning fits in over here. Okay, again, I must just say that without natural language processing, machine learning wouldn't be able to perform any predictions because it would not be able to interpret and understand language. And without big data to compare to, it would not be able to ask the appropriate question. So what we're going to do over here is we'll just call that ML for machine learning. So there are different forms of machine learning, and some of them are subsets of machine learning, of course. So the next one that I want to talk about very, very quickly is over here, which we refer to as probably the best reference thereof would be deep learning. Okay, or if we were to do an abbreviation, we'll just do like a DL like that. Now the trick I think always with deep learning, and then we'll talk about the utilization thereof. It's a special kind of machine learning, and it tries to mimic how the brain works. Okay. So instead of us providing it with details about perhaps images or language or characters and training it to be able to recognize the differences, all we're going to do is we're just going to give it a bunch of data and it's going to teach itself. Okay, that's deep learning. It kind of works the way that a human brain works, and that's why we sometimes refer to it as a neural network. We can go into some details of that at some other point in time, but these networks are made up of layers of neurons, just like brain cells. Those brain cells or those neurons, they process information in a way that allows the computer to learn very, very complex patterns. So imagine teaching a computer to recognize a cat in a photo. So with regular machine learning, you might have to tell it things like the cat has pointy ears, or the cat has whiskers, right? Or you might have to tell it the different variety of colors that could potentially be cats. I mean, you don't get blue cats, for example. But with deep learning, you just give it thousands of cat photos, and it's going to figure out the patterns on its own. So there's no need for us to tell it what to look for. It kind of figures it out on its own. Very good examples of deep learning would be things like facial recognition. So again, we go back to your cell phone. If you have facial recognition on your cell phone, even if you, I have, for example, on my banking app. So even if you are in different lighting, or you have a new haircut, or in my case, a couple of weeks ago, I shaved off my beard and it was still able to recognize my facial features. That's actually deep learning at work. Another example, I think, of deep learning, instead of me thinking of examples, I've written down some examples. Another example of deep learning might be something like medical imaging. Where a deep learning algorithm will help a doctor detect diseases like cancer or arthritis from X-rays or MRIs or CT scans with a high degree of accuracy. So no longer does the doctor have to rely solely on his knowledge, his experience, and his discretion. We can have a machine learning algorithm assist the doctor in making that prediction. So there are other formats of deep learning as well. The most common use of deep learning, I think, is to recognize video streams, or to recognize complex images and make predictions based on complex images. So I think I have an example of a complex image. So this is going to be quite an interesting. It's going to be quite an interesting experiment because there I have an image, right? Let me share the image with you quickly. I'll try and show you the image. And here's the image, like that. Okay, this is an actual photo that was taken somewhere on planet Earth. And what I want to do is I don't want it only to recognize what type of image it is, but I wanted to tell me where the image was potentially taken, right? So let's use Copilot again. I will use some other AI tools for demonstrations a little bit later. But can we say where was the following image likely taken? Not what is the following image, where was the following image taken? There are lots of ways for me to interact with my Copilot over here. I'm going to try my best to just do a drag and drop of the image instead of me having to browse for it every time. And let's see what kind of prediction we get. This is a good example of deep learning in action. All right. Resembles areas like whatever that is and the grand staircase. I can tell you for a fact that because I know I took the image, this comes from Utah. Okay, it is an image from Utah. Okay, so there's deep learning in action. Now remember, this first part is just to get to grips with some of the AI technologies. The second part is going to be to explore practical use cases thereof. And the third part will look at how can we use that for policy development and in particular curriculum development. But understanding the different capabilities of AI tools is already halfway there. So what's next? So here I have my deep learning. Now there's a very special type of machine learning, and it's considered to be a subset of deep learning. And this very special type of artificial intelligence or machine learning is referred to as generative AI or Gen AI. So if you don't mind, I'll just annotate here. So we'll have that as Gen AI. Gen AI, simply speaking, is creating from new. Okay. So it's a type of artificial intelligence that can create new content. So it can create like text, or it can create images, or it can create music, or it can perhaps even create videos. And it does that based on patterns that it has learned from existing data. What is the existing data? The outlying big data that we spoke about before. So I guess imagine teaching a robot by showing it thousands of paintings. Okay, and after learning the styles, it can then paint its own original work. That's what generative AI does. It learns from examples and then creates something new that didn't exist before. Right, and there are lots of practical applications of generative AI, of course, and some of the practical applications of generative AI would look something like that. I use it quite extensively for composing images. So I can probably do that for us quickly. So and this time around, instead of just using Microsoft Copilot, I have another AI tool that I like to use. And let's try this with Napkin AI. I find Napkin AI is able to translate text into images very effectively. And this is a great example of generative AI. So what I want to do is I want to describe something to Napkin AI, and I want Napkin AI to do a little bit of work in the background and do its thing, basically, right? So I use this extensively when it comes to creating complex PowerPoint presentations or complex images. So I might have to sign in again. If I do, please just excuse me while that happens. We try to prepare ourselves best we can for presentation, but sometimes the browser times out and we might just have to go ahead and reopen it and re-authenticate. So this is called napkin.ai, just like that. And of course, I'm quickly going to have to sign in. And hopefully, once I've signed in, I should be able to create. There we go. So what I want to do is I want to draft something with AI. So let's see how it works. Okay, remember, this is now Gen AI doing its thing. So I'm going to describe a learning process, and I want to see what Napkin AI can come up with. So the way that I would describe it is prompting is always based on the question that you ask, and you need to be as thorough as possible without overwhelming the AI assistant. So I'm going to do something like this. I am Please excuse me while I remain quiet. I'm only a man. I can't do multiple things at the same time. And I'm typing, and I generally, when I type, I can't talk. I am. Right, I'm just going to try my best to copy and paste, copy and paste quickly. I think if I remember, it's unconscious incompetence, then it's conscious incompetence, and then it would be conscious incompetence, and then it would be conscious competence. All right, you still have to think about what you're doing, and then over here we'll have unconscious competence, where things come naturally and you don't have to think about it anymore, simply because you've practiced it that much. So let's see. So this is something that didn't exist before, right? And there we have it being generated. Now you might say, but Trevor, what we could do is we could probably do exactly the same thing, and ask ChatGPT or perhaps Copilot to do it for me. But look at what I can do over here. Okay, I wanted to generate an image for me. Okay, and then it gives me a variety of options for my image. And the image that I want is probably going to look something like, look at all the options that we have available, including more. All right. So imagine you're developing a curriculum for your students, or you're doing policy design, and the first part of policy design is to describe the methodology that you used to do the policy design. Describe it. You can use AI assistants to help you describe it, but thereafter, what you need is you perhaps need to. Well, I think I quite like that. All right. You might want to illustrate it with an image. For my interpretation of this particular image is that learning is a life cycle process. It's a process that starts somewhere and ends somewhere. Right. As a matter of fact, I think it's more circular in nature than anything else. And no, this is fantastic, and this is a great example of generative AI. I know, we can have some other examples of generative AI, such as let's take a Microsoft perspective thereof, and let's open up a presentation over here. And we're going to use generative AI to create a PowerPoint presentation for us. I find this to be particularly useful. Often what I do is I use a AI assistant to generate the context and the text for me, and thereafter I use the generative AI capability embedded in PowerPoint to convert that into a presentation. So we can do that quite quickly if I just go. There's lots of ways to skin a cat if you're into that kind of thing. We'll just go to Copilot very briefly over here, and then what I will do is I'll say, if we are going to be pedantic about it, we'll say I am a lecturer at NetCampus and need to create. See, me typing and talking at the same time doesn't work. Okay, and then we'll do a little space, and we'll go and add the following. So what I've done is I use this quite frequently. So if I just upload from my device, I'm pretty confident that I have a document that we can use quickly. And we'll just go to NSG over there and let's do something simple. Living in, okay, this is an example I'll use for something else as well. And let's see if it has the ability to go ahead and create a presentation that I can use for something useful and something practical. And that's quite a complex document from files that are saved as .doc yet. And that's not exactly correct. So if that is the case, then let's go ahead and open a document. I'm pretty confident that that is not the case. Sometimes what we have to do with our Copilot is sometimes we just have to convince it to do what we want it to do. Right, so we'll just go and try and ask it again. I think in this instance, Copilot is like a good friend that you have, right? And sometimes your friend is just not interested in answering you. So what you do is you nag it and you keep on asking it. So let's see if we can just try that again. And this time we'll just upload it from my device over there. And if not, I'll convert it to a PDF. Okay. If I have to convert it to a PDF, we'll see. Okay, there. My friend decided that it was better for him to answer the question now. All right, and there we have a document. All right. Now that's not quite what I wanted, but I can go ahead and I can go file save as, and this time we'll go ahead and save it as a docx file. And what we'll do is we'll call it. I think it was associated with climate change. Right. I'm quite aware of climate change myself, but maybe that's just me. And now I want to go ahead and do a presentation based on that document. No problem. The generative AI capability of some of the tools that we have available, such as in PowerPoint, will assist me with that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can attach the file that I've just uploaded. Right, and I think I put it over here somewhere. Maybe that's the .doc. And I think I put it in the NetCampus folder. And I called it climate change over there. Right, and without prompting it further, although voice is probably the way to go from here, please go ahead and create a presentation based on the attached document. Right? Typing is not my forte, and then we'll ask it to go ahead and use its generative AI capability. So what I like about this generative AI capability over here is that it is doing it from inside Word. Okay, and inside PowerPoint. Need more content to work with to make this into a deck. Sorry, I don't know what's in the document. Just downloaded it a little bit earlier, but we should be able to use a document that I know is particularly useful. And let's go into there, and then what we'll do is we'll just use that one. All right, I'm pretty confident that one has sufficient information in it. Now, how does this assist me? I have to do many presentations, honestly, and you know, I've never been a PowerPoint aficionado by any stretch of the imagination. I just need the basics, honestly. I just need a PowerPoint presentation that will trigger an idea so that I can speak about the idea. Some people have asked me, Trevor, you know, why don't you do animations in your PowerPoint presentation? Of course, Copilot can assist me with that if I needed to. I don't like it. I find it to be distracting, but you know, to each his own, I would say. And there we have a couple of slides, and we can now interact with those slides. So that's the generative AI capability of a Copilot. How is that going to help me? Well, you know, when it comes to policy creation, not only do I have to understand the policy creation procedure and be able to communicate that to my audience, but I also have to be able to output the policy based on a description that I provide. and the generative AI capabilities of your AI assistant is going to help you with that tremendously. Okay, so moving on, where to from here? The last thing that I want to talk about briefly, apologies, it has taken a little bit longer than anticipated, is the idea of a large language model and what large language models are and why these large language models are important. Large language models is a type of artificial intelligence that's designed to understand and generate human language. Okay. Think of them as a super smart robot that has read almost everything on the internet. Okay, it doesn't just memorize facts, it learns how language works so that it can answer questions, it can write stories, it can translate languages, and it can even chat like a human being. Okay, so natural language processing is the understanding of human language, but now what we want to rely on is getting a response based on that understanding. So for me, if I were to illustrate this, I would say that large language models, this is kind of the model on which all the other AI methodologies relies. So we'll call this a large language model. So here's a practical example of a large language model. Perhaps I've done a presentation for you before, and I might have told you the story before, but so be it. I was at a AI conference where I was fortunate enough to be asked to do a simple presentation. And after my presentation, it was associated with AI. After my presentation, a student from TUT, the TUT Student Council was there. And when I say a student, the entire TUT Student Council that was represented came and asked me a question. And the question they asked me, I thought was quite an interesting question, and I'd never thought of a question like that before. And the question was, how do we Africanize artificial intelligence? And I stood there and I thought to myself, what exactly do you mean with Africanized artificial intelligence? Because artificial intelligence is not an American, a European, or a Chinese or an African thing. Artificial intelligence is just artificial intelligence. So I asked the question, what do you mean with Africanize? And the response I got was a very valid response. We would like our artificial intelligence model to be able to present us with options from the African context rather than from a European or an American context. I think it's a valid question because we are from Africa after all. The answer was quite simple, as a matter of fact. You need a large language model that can be consumed by your artificial intelligence service. So we need to have a large language model that provides the context of Africa rather than relying on large language models that provide the context from European or North American perspectives. So in simple terms, we have to have a super smart robot that can read everything associated with our context being Africa and not the entirety of the internet. And it will then have the ability not only to memorize the context, but also learn from the content that we've provided it, so that it can answer questions and write stories and translate languages and chat to us like a human being. A very good example of, perhaps I can take a minute to try to illustrate this. In this case, let's use something like ChatGPT. Okay, so I'm cognizant of the idea that I might have that the tab might have been idle for too long and it might have signed me out. So I just refreshed it quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question that's perhaps way out of left field, right? So it's a question associated with something that I certainly have never asked ChatGPT this question before. So if I were to think of a question quickly, my question would be something like, tell me more about the process behind, let's go behind policy development. Right. So one of the important things that we're going to have to realize at some point in time is that it's not good enough to be able to create a policy. We need to be able to, but it's easy to ask a Copilot to go ahead and create a policy for me, right? That's relatively straightforward. But I ran into quite an interesting situation a couple of days ago. I was at a client meeting, one of our very, very big clients, a government department. And one of the attendees had to do a presentation, and the presentation they had done, they knew the content of the presentation, but the presentation was created by an AI system, right? So when they had the presentation open in front of them, they were able to walk through the presentation without any difficulty. But we have access to Copilots as well. So during the presentation, somebody, unfortunately, the attendee's manager asked the question from Copilot and got exactly the same presentation. And the presenter was caught a little bit off guard with the questions and the follow-up questions that he received, because he knew the content of the presentation quite well, but didn't understand the process behind the creation of the presentation, didn't understand the nuances of the numbers that he was reporting. Not only do I want a Copilot to be able to do the work for me, I'm still going to need to understand what the work is that was done and why the work was done in that particular fashion, because you still have to do the presentation. The Copilot is not going to do the presentation for you. So policy development is a structured process by all governments. Okay, so I think this was ChatGPT. Right. Let's see if we do the same thing with perhaps Gemini. Gemini is the Google AI tool. And then what we'll also do is we'll do exactly the same thing with Microsoft Copilot. And then we'll see what the results look like. Right. Of course, this is not playing up one artificial intelligence service against another. Think of it like getting a second opinion. Right. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor diagnoses you with having malaria or COVID, it's usually a good idea to get a second opinion from somewhere else. So this is what Microsoft Copilot has to say. And now the interesting thing is what I could potentially do from here is I could potentially take this output from Microsoft Copilot, which, yes, okay, it's great content. But maybe I'm going to go ahead and let's see if there we go. So let's create a new napkin. Okay. And let's create a blank napkin if we can. And let's insert our text over here. And let's see if we can have this AI service translate that into an image that makes a little bit of sense. All right. So again, using look at that. That looks pretty decent for me. And I think what I'll do is I'll keep that image. All right. So what I can do with this is I can now go ahead and I can save it. I can copy and paste it into Word. I can use it in a PowerPoint presentation and so on and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, what I've done is I've asked my Copilot friends to assist me with the creation of something. Right. I'm going to, at some point in time, be using this something, or I'm going to be presenting this something to somebody. And you have to ensure that the content is correct. And not only is the content correct, you're also going to have to ensure that you understand the content, so that if you are asked questions about the content, you don't have to answer a question about problem identification. Now suddenly I have to open up my Copilot and say, expand on problem identification for me, so I can answer typical questions. I'm looking at my keyboard. I'm sorry if I misspelled a whole bunch of things over there, but okay. There we have some problem identification, some questions that we might encounter. All right. So you're going to have to be sure that you do all of this work up front before you go ahead and create your presentation and present it, because you're going to be guaranteed to be asked many, many questions associated with your presentation. AI and AI assistants like this, these AI assistants are exactly that. They are assistants, right? They are not doing the work for you. You are ultimately responsible and in many cases accountable for what you present. And in some cases, and in many cases, you'll find that if we export this, it will say generated by AI. It might be incorrect. Right. Remember, it's simply looking at the large language model and perhaps it misinterpreted your question and therefore gave you an answer based on this misinterpretation of your question. So you still have to go ahead and confirm everything that needs to be confirmed. All right. So generically speaking, this is what artificial intelligence is comprised of. At least modern AI looks like this: big data, natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning, generative AI, and at the core of it, the large language model, or the entirety of its understanding of the data that we want to present it with, and where answers are going to be coming from. Okay, so it took me a little bit longer than anticipated, but I trust that as we were working our way through this, you were able to see how we could use this artificial intelligence in our way of work, how we could use this to perhaps go and help us generate policies, and not only generate the policy, because it's not important to be able to generate a policy. It's important to have context for the policy, understand the policy and the implications of the policy. And the AI services that are available can certainly assist us with this extensively. So I use a lot of different AI services. Mostly, I must admit, I'm biased towards the Microsoft AI services simply because I'm most familiar with the Microsoft AI services, to be fair. But there are many different services that we could leverage for this. Now you have the background, right? So now what we can do is, or let's try and do this. Now what we can do is we can kind of look at how these AI services can be used in different contexts. I know the context that we are working towards is policy development and curriculum development, but there are many different contexts that we potentially use for our AI services. And I'm going to do this extensively using Microsoft Copilot. You can, of course, use whichever you like. And if you don't like the context that I'm providing, I will swap to different or change to different types of contexts. So I'm sure that you'll find benefit into at least in one or two of these different contexts. So the first one that I'm going to use, I'm going to try my best to use Microsoft Word for this. All right. So Word, great feature in Word. If you have included that feature, of course, is the idea of having Copilot. All right. So frankly speaking, embedded in Word and of course embedded in many Microsoft tools. Hopefully, I will be able to show you some of the tools that you don't frequently work with, is having a Copilot. It's very frustrating at times to work in a browser and then needing to copy and paste from in the browser. Why bother if we can just use it in Microsoft Word, right? So I think rather let me do it like this. So I have a document open here somewhere, and I think it's just a common Word document. And that common Word document, let's just grab hold of an income statement quickly. All right. So what I'm going to do for you very quickly is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share a great resource with you. Right. And this great resource is freely available and freely accessible. I'm just going to share if I can figure out how. Let's see if I can get to the team chat. And let's see if we can open up a new chat. Trevor Jones is me. And then what I'll do is let's see if we can somehow enable a chat. My apologies. I'm not that familiar with what do we call it? Chrome, or not Chrome, Zoom. I tend to use other platforms for my delivery, in particular GoToTraining. But I want to share a web resource with you if I can. If the share doesn't work, it's not a big deal. I'll show you where to get hold of it. So here's a great course, free, of course. You can easily access it. It's free, gratis en finite. Microsoft makes this available to absolutely everybody. And this course has a number of use cases for, in particular, Microsoft Copilot, right? So as I'm going through some of these use cases, you can think about how you can use these in policy development and perhaps in curriculum development as well, because that's ultimately where we're working towards. So what I have over here is I have an income statement. It's not a very complex income statement, I agree, but there's an income statement. And, you know, frankly, I don't know too much about income statements, but perhaps something that I want to do is I want to use this income statement and as the source of a presentation that I need to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab hold of Copilot quickly, and I'm going to ask Copilot to do something for me. All right. Let's see, write a speech for stakeholders of the company's income statement found in the, not the attached file, the open document. Let's see if we can end up with something useful. Right. So this means that I don't have to upload everything into Copilot on the web. I can simply use Microsoft Word to get exactly that. Right, and there it's writing the speech for me. And hopefully what we can do, it has some citations. Okay. Now, I mean, you know, if not for Copilot, I would have to interpret this data. Okay. So let's say that we are in the development phase of our curriculum and we are creating the course content, or we're creating the content that we want to present. Instead of me having to sit and create the content, I can simply point it to a document and ask it to create the content for me. Right. Of course, what I can do is I can go ahead and I can insert that. Okay, so I didn't quite want to insert that exactly there. So maybe what I'll do is I'll open up a new page over there, and we'll go ahead and we'll insert that into the new page. And there I have my speech. All right. Now, the format is not perhaps exactly what I want. But I have an outline. Perhaps what I want to do is I want to format some data in a table. All right. So maybe what we'll do is we'll say something to the effect of show me the numbers in a table format. Okay, so show me the numbers is not a good way to ask, right? Maybe what I do is I should say summarize the numbers in table. Once I fix it, of course, in table format, something to that effect. And let's see if we get a different kind of result, and perhaps this is the result that we could use. Right. So there's a table summarizing all the values for me. Right. Hopefully not every single value we have at the top over here. That's a bit overwhelming. But there we have that. And what we should be able to do is we should be able to take snippets of it and insert that into our document. So like I always say to people that there are many ways to do the same thing. If you didn't like doing it inside Word, or perhaps you didn't have a Microsoft Copilot license for Word, because of course, you know, Microsoft Copilot, there's a free version thereof and there's a paid for version. The paid for version is the version that's integrated into all of the Office applications. And perhaps you didn't have that. That's not necessarily a problem. It does require a little bit more clicking, but it's not necessarily a problem, because one of the things that I could do is I could just access Copilot on the web over here, right? By accessing Copilot on the web, I still have the ability to attach content and still ask it to generate something for me. It won't generate it necessarily in a Word document, but it's very easy to copy and paste something, to copy it from the output window and paste it into Word. Now there's a little bit of a caveat to this, and that caveat is safety and security, of course. We want to be sure that whatever we present to our Copilot, whether it is Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, or ChatGPT, we want to be sure that that data remains safe and secure, and that the data that we present it with is not going to be used to train additional models. Right, so that we don't expose data. So something interesting, let's ask Copilot, can you identify the person in the following image? Right, and let's do like a space over there, and let's see if I can find a image of me. So maybe I have to go to pictures, and that's an image of me. And I'll drop that in over there, and let's see what Microsoft Copilot says. All right. Okay. No way is Copilot going to identify that as me, not because it's not possible, but because there are certain privacy requirements. All right. So it won't tell me the name of the person, even when it can find it, unless, of course, you're a public figure. So if I inserted a picture of Mr. Vladimir Putin in over there, of course, that would go ahead and tell me who that was. Right. So there's a quick way in which I can identify specific types of data, a quick way that we can analyze that type of data, and also can you highlight the key changes for me? Right. Or perhaps can you interpret the data for me? Can you speculate as to why the net income increased from year to year? So we can ask those questions directly from our Word interface rather than having to use the web browser. Right. And of course, once I have a document, I can use the generative AI capability of Microsoft PowerPoint to convert that document into a PowerPoint presentation. And I can annotate the notes associated with that PowerPoint presentation if that's something that I wanted to do. So that's a great utilization of an AI assistant. When it comes to policy development and curriculum development, of course, we can do something very similar. If it were me, what I would probably end up doing is because, I always say to people, it's not good enough for me to be able to do something. It is important for me to understand the process behind what is being done. So let's say, for example, that I need to create a policy associated with information security management. So maybe I'm the CIO of an organization, or I'm a facilitator, and I'm going to be presenting to a collection of CIOs about what should we call it? Security policies or network security policies. So what I could do is I could say something like this. I am. Let's try a different Copilot quickly. So let's try Gemini over here. Let's allow the audio. Okay. I think I might have to keep it in. I am the facilitator at NetCampus and would like to know about policy development associated with network security. All right, and hopefully I will be able to ask the question from Gemini quickly. Now, notice I didn't ask it to develop a policy for me. All right, what I asked it to do is I asked it to tell me about policy development. This is all part of the grander scheme of things. All right. So wow, that's quite an output, and it's still continuing. Okay, that's still continuing and still continuing. So it's not as easy as people make it out to be. You know, generally speaking, I can just go ahead and tell it to draft a policy, but like I say, that's not good enough. So let's see if we can do this. Using the outline above, go ahead and create a policy document associated with network security. Using the document or the preceding information, go ahead and create a policy document for implementation at NetCampus regarding network security. Right. So now that I understand the process behind policy development, I'm much more comfortable having it create the document for me. Right. Now, again, remember, at the end of the day, this is a great shortcut, but you're going to be responsible and accountable for the contents of this document. So this is something that we have to review, make sure the context is appropriate, make sure that any quoted numbers are appropriate so that we can make the presentation. Right. So now that I know not only what the process is, I'm pretty confident that this process is being followed in the creation of our network security policy. Right. And there we go. And of course, it has some sources that we can quote. Right. I like the source. And what I'm going to do, good luck. It was able to recognize me as a network, as a facilitator, of course. And there's a policy document. Now, you know, a lot of people are going to say to me, Trevor, you're cheating. You're cheating, okay? This is not your work. And my response to them is quite simple. Artificial intelligence and the way that I use it, artificial intelligence for me is a tool, right? If you are a gardener, if you like working in the garden, I'm a part-time gardener, and I have to plant a rose bush, trust me, I'm not going to be digging the hole with my hands. I'm not going to be asking my wife to hand me a spoon so I can dig the hole. If a spade is available, I'm of course going to use the spade to dig the hole. Right. I'm still, the spade is just the instrument. The spade is just the tool. Right. And there's an adage that I always quote to people. And for me, AI is just a tool. Right. But there's an adage that I quote. A fool with a tool is still a fool. So if you use AI to generate the content, but you don't understand the content that is being generated, the tool doesn't make you smarter. Okay. As a matter of fact, the tool highlights your own inadequacies. So the more research you can do around the topic, the better it is going to be for you. So now what I might do is I might grab hold of that, right? And unfortunately, let's see if we can do this. Okay. Sorry. My mistake. I'm just going to grab hold of that and I'm going to put that into Microsoft Word quickly so that I can retain it. Okay, so there's my policy document. Let's go file, save as, and we'll just put that into somewhere and we'll say network security policy. Right, I'll save that quickly. Just so that we have it. There's a great feature in many of the AI services that we have available. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that so that I don't have to talk too much. Okay, and we're going to paste that in over there. And let's see if we can use the deep search capability. All right, so the deep search capability should theoretically give me much more detail associated with each of the items, but because we are performing a deep search, it may take a little bit longer to do the analysis for me. All right, and there's the rest of it, nicely broken down. Create a report, and let's say, let's go and search. All right, you'll notice that there was a little icon that says edit the plan, so I could potentially go and add steps to my plan if that's what I wanted to do. All right, so there we go. Great capability, but people misuse this capability. Okay, and I think part of the reason why people misuse the capability is they don't want to take responsibility for the result. So they leave it up to Google or up to ChatGPT or up to Microsoft to make all the fundamental decisions, and that is not the right thing to do. You're going to end up with a result that you cannot substantiate, right? Or in many cases, you may end up with a result that is inaccurate. So what I like about the deep learning or the deep search capability over here is that it shows me where the policy references are going to come from. All right. And I really appreciate this because now what I can do is I can validate before I do my presentation. But let's imagine for a moment we have gone and validated. We've copy and pasted into Word, we've saved it. And now, of course, we have to end up with our presentation. So think in terms of curriculum development, right? If you are going to do the research and you're going to need to present that to a collection of students or to attendees of a meeting, wouldn't it be great if we had the capability to take this research and automatically convert it into PowerPoint, right? And we now understand that that capability is available. And not only is that capability available, but we can also ask the presentation questions. Right. So if, for example, we had a summary of an income statement, we could ask a question, even a question that would speculate on why the net income either increased or decreased from year to year based on the industry that we're in. Perhaps the industry type was going through a recession. And we could do that as well. Right. As a matter of fact, we some amazing functionality associated with generative AI. We can give it a list of, we can ask it to insert a PowerPoint slide that has a list of questions and answers generated based on the content. And at any given point in time, of course, you'll notice that I've used two AI services. I used Gemini to do the generation for me, okay? And over here, let's say that show the thinking and show me only the sites that were browsed for the contents. All right. So I have the generated information, and I now know and I now know why it was generated in that particular way. Okay. Well, if I go back, I have the generated content. Should really have opened up a new tab, but that's beyond the scope. All right. So great functionality for me as a facilitator, for me as a curriculum developer. Believe it or not, we do a lot of custom content, and I develop curriculums associated with lots of different content. And often I don't only have to develop the outline of the curriculum, I have to develop the details, I have to develop the contents, I have to develop the presentations, and so forth and so forth. Fortunately, in our company, we never get asked to develop content for which we don't have a background. All right, so already some great information that's available. There's perhaps another great tool that I can show you quickly.
Maybe right there, Trevor, if I can
Yes, ma'am.
interject.
Yes.
Some of the colleagues are really asking questions in there. Maybe we can take some few questions for 5 minutes, and then we'll revert back to your session again.
All right.
Maybe colleagues also, if for those that are having their hands as well, maybe because some you can allow for those that are having their hands up and then to be asked questions, and then we will take them, and then so that it can be an interactive session where people get to learn more about these technologies and the use of this technology, especially in the public sector. How are they enabling us to actually execute our mandate? So maybe you can
if I can just,
over that side, Trevor.
If I can just interject over there. Please understand that this is not a training session. A training session would be a 5-day engagement. We only have 3 hours. And
Yes.
if we spend a lot of time answering questions, which I'm happy to do, just bear in mind that we won't necessarily get to all of the content. Right.
All right. No,
happy
thank
to
you
take
so much,
some
Trevor, for that. Maybe we can in that note, we can only take the ones that are on the Q&A, and then we'll see upon the time if our time allows towards the end, we can take the hands. But maybe we can take those ones that are on the Q&A. Thanks, Trevor. Over to you.
How many thousands of questions are in the Q&A?
You've got hundreds of thousands of questions in there.
So if you can maybe just provide me with, okay, let me just try this quickly. So I'm going to go there and look at the Q&A. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to start at the top and try my best to work my way down to the bottom. Unfortunately, if the question is going to take 10 or 20 minutes to answer, I won't be able to answer it in this forum. but I will share my email address with you, and you can do one of two things. You can either email me, or you can ask your question of Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, or ChatGPT, and see what the type of answer is that you're going to get. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start our way at the top. Salelo, I think, and what analysis technique do you use to manipulate the big volumes of data sources for ease of simplification data to meet one's requirement? So I think for me, when I work with large volumes of data, there's a very simple technique. And I was at SALGA, South African Local Government Association, and somebody asked me a very similar question. And my answer was to use the standard technique of taking data, turning it into useful information, taking that useful information, turning it into a visual representation, and then applying my knowledge and my skill and my experience associated with the topic to drive decision making. All right. So very simple analysis technique, which we refer to, which Salga refers to as Dick Willem. Right. The only difference is in the modern world, because of the complexity of data, it's very difficult for me to interpret the data. So what I use is whichever machine learning methodology, machine learning technique available for that particular type of data. And sometimes it's something as simple as using a Copilot, and sometimes it's something a little bit more complex where we've built our own machine learning model. Right. So there's a quick answer to that one. Right. The next question, I think somebody has a lot of time. Also from Salelo, from natural language processing, are the African languages being incorporated into AI? Okay, this is very simple. It's very similar to the question that I got asked by the TUT Student Council. Yes, they are, and they are generally incorporated into most of the AI services that are available online. It might, of course, not necessarily have every single nuance of every single language, but it is being incorporated. However, there is nothing that prevents any of us from using Azure AI services or AWS AI services and building, or even open AI services to build our own large language models and train our artificial intelligence bot, which we of course can create ourselves on the data that we presented with. All right. So that's the answer from a large language processing perspective. And question was about African languages incorporated into it. All right. You'll find that most African languages are, if not all of them, but there might be nuances between dialects that are not incorporated. But again, the true answer is that the publicly available AI services that you see over here is the tip of the iceberg. There is nothing that prevents you from building your own AI services using standard and commonly accessible tools. Right. So I'm going to say that one is done. Next question. Within government, what type of public data access sources in South Africa do we have so that we can analyze data? So this is based again on the large language model. So if anything is publicly accessible, that has probably been indexed and is probably part of the large language model. So everything that is publicly accessible. So I would say that most, if not all, of what is publicly accessible is going to be available, and that's relatively easy to check if you use something like Gemini, or you use something like ChatGPT with its deep learning function. Its deep learning function will show you the sources that it crawled to be able to obtain the answer based on the question that you asked. More interestingly, not that wasn't interesting, but more interestingly, nothing prevents you from building your own. So if you have private data sources, there are a lot of open AI tools that we can use to build our own large language models. As a matter of fact, if you I don't really want to do this, but perhaps it's interesting enough to try and do it. I don't want to build I don't want to build a large language model, but I have built one before, and I'm just quickly looking to see if I have it. So just give me a second. Who did I do it for? Sorry, sometimes I forget. Oh yeah, I found it. So this is a large language model that I built based on the government gazette. Right. So I'll show you now. There's a particular problem that we encountered. Um, an organization publishing the government gazette, so you can imagine who it is, wants to be able to not only search the government gazette that they published, but any previous version thereof, and ask questions about the content of the government gazette in particular. They don't want to go ahead and search any results from the internet. They want to manage and maintain their own large language model. There are many reasons for this, but suffice to say that using a couple of AI tools, so this is just me showing you a little video clip of what I did. Don't worry, I'm not going to play the entire contents of it. But what is happening over here is I'm deploying the large language model, right? And I'm using the large language model and I'm going to populate it with the government gazette, right? And there's the government gazette, looking at the contents of the government gazette and deploying the large language model so that now I can start asking questions from that particular government gazette or any particular reference to any government gazettes in the past, right? So within the government context, yes, of course, there's a lot of data that is publicly available and publicly accessible. And that data ranges from everything such as how to obtain a new driver's license. I was in a car crash a couple of days ago, and first time in my life that I've been in a car involved in a car accident, and I didn't know what the process was behind reporting the car crash, because the other person drove away from the accident. So I was able to find that type of information readily accessible. But again, the true answer is there is no reason that I cannot build my own large language model, deploy that large language model, create an AI assistant to interrogate that large language model, as is the case over here. Right. And there's also, of course, the ability to have a hybrid large language model where you build the large language model based on your own data, your own experience, keeping that private and still leveraging another large language model. Right. It sounds like it's very complex, but as a matter of fact, Microsoft, I always get back to Microsoft, of course. Microsoft, in their wisdom, has has an amazing, if I can find it quickly, has an amazing experience over years somewhere. It's called, if I just go over here, hey, there it goes. It's called Copilot Studio. All right. So using Copilot Studio, I can build my own AI assistant, and I can use my own large language model to provide answers for that AI assistant, knowing that the AI assistant is private in nature, right? So a couple of more questions. Would machine learning capability help in automating organizational processes to ensure efficiency? The answer is yes. All right. If I just think the practical example thereof would be a security context. Maybe I can demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up Wireshark. Right. So part of my work and part of my job is analyzing network traffic. Right. So let's not install an update. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture network traffic on my network, on my Ethernet adapter. And I'm going to just capture traffic and I'm going to minimize that. So one of the challenges that we have with analyzing network traffic is the sheer volume of network traffic that is collected. So within a minute period of time, there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions or trillions of frames that traverse the network. And it's impossible for a human being to be able to analyze all of that network traffic. Why do I want to analyze that network traffic? Because there are patterns in network traffic. You know, let's say, for example, one of the patterns indicates that on Sundays there is very little network traffic, and now suddenly on a particular Sunday I see that there is a lot of network traffic, and not only a lot of network traffic, but a lot of network traffic from a particular source, and perhaps that particular source is an unknown source. It is impossible for a human being or a team of human beings to be able to analyze that data. So most network appliances, most network intrusion devices, they are analyzing this data with machine learning algorithms in real time. Not a historical view, but in real time, and trying to understand what the patterns look like, being able to identify deviations from that pattern, and in many cases also respond actively once it has identified a pattern. So if it were up to me, what I would do is, if I just do that quickly and we stop that, that was one device on my network, my home network. I don't have many devices. And in that period of time from when I started, there were 13,469 frames that were sent across this network. Right. Now that's only the number of frames. That does not include the frame data itself. Right. And in this case, the frame data might include the actual data that was sent. And this all needs to be analyzed to be able to identify. Perhaps what we want to identify is whether usernames and passwords are being sent across the network in clear text, right? Because that's the surefire way to identify a security vulnerability. So certainly, if you're going to try and depend on a human being to look at this, you are going to employ an entire team of human beings, hundreds, if not thousands of human beings to be able to perform this type of analysis, right? So the next question is, how can deep learning concept assist in identification of individuals when transacting with government? For example, Home Affairs have South African Data Store repository of our fingerprints, or perhaps facial recognition, or perhaps sometime in the future, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using electronic voter identification or electronic voter registration. So I can tell you about a specific instance. It's perhaps not a government instance, but perhaps it will highlight its capability. So imagine for a moment that you are visiting Qatar Airport or Dubai Airport, right? And we are going to do electronic check-in for you. But instead of you doing electronic check-in on your laptop, what happens when you enter the airport, facial recognition based on the video cameras or the web cameras that are available throughout the airport, identify who you are, identify the flight that you're booked on, scheduled on, and automatically checks you in as you enter the airport without any interaction, without you having to interact not only with a human being, but even interacting with one of those stupid terminals where you have to present your identification. Right. So there's a great example thereof. How can the South African government use something like that? Imagine for future votes being casted at polling stations. One of the things that keeps me away from voting, even though I know it's my civic duty and I should be doing it, is the queue that I have to stand in. And then somebody has to do a lookup on a list where they have to scroll down with a ruler to be able to find my name, which they invariably mistype or misspell, and it takes me about 5 minutes, and then I have to mark on my finger that I actually did vote and all of those things. So imagine the capability of deep learning being able to do facial recognition irrespective of light conditions, irrespective of whether you've shaved your head or grew your beard or plucked your eyebrows, still being able to do that facial recognition, checking you in, issuing you with a ballot paper. And imagine not issuing you with a ballot paper, but allowing you to electronically vote. Okay, and electronically apply security behind that vote. So that's the capability of something like deep learning, right? So are you happy so far? Am I okay answering these questions? You
You
happy
are
so far?
absolutely spot on, Trevor.
There's enough time. Okay, so if you're happy, I'm happy. So you're going to share some of the resources with the participants. That would mean that what I would have to do is I would have to take my brain out and share my brain with you. I'm just being facetious. Yes, absolutely. What I will do is I will try my best to make sure that in the chat window, I can give you some shortcuts to some of these tools that I've been talking about. And I haven't even illustrated the amazing capabilities of most of these tools. But things like Napkin AI, I'm going to show you a fantastic tool for research papers. Perhaps it's a fantastic tool. Perhaps you will appreciate it. So if you needed to create a research paper or scientific paper, I can show you some AI tools that can assist you with that. Remember, when I show you AI tools, the idea is that you use it exactly as that, as a tool, right? Don't, for example, go and do a research paper with an AI tool and submit that and say, okay, congratulations, I did the research. It's not the intent here. The intent is to provide you with guidance and so that you can generate understanding. All right. So yes, I will try my best to share some of these links and some of the tools that I'm highlighting. How come is the South African Police Services not using generative AI to solve crime-related cases and for investigation simulation? Okay. So I can speculate on the answer. I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can speculate on the answer or about the answer. So let's start that. I don't think that most people understand the impact that AI is having on our day-to-day lives, right? There are still many people who are oblivious to the capabilities of AI, and these are not your typical factory worker, your typical blue collar worker. Okay, we're talking even about senior officials in government. I'm fortunate enough to be very involved in trying to create AI awareness. I spoke to a premier of one of our provinces, um, and he was very forthcoming. When he has to do a presentation associated with AI, somebody else creates the presentation for him, and what happens is he simply learns the presentation. And when he stands up and does the presentation, he talks about AI. He himself does not understand the impact and the consequences of artificial intelligence. And this is from a premier in a province. Now you can well imagine that if we have a senior official in the South African Police Services, what is their understanding of artificial intelligence, right? Do they know what AI is, as an example? Another, if I were to speculate even further, even if they do understand artificial intelligence, there are budgetary constraints, right? And there are data privacy and security constraints. So those are some of the things that I can just think about off the top of my head. If I were being really facetious, what I would do is I would just go ahead and say this. Okay, we'll take that question and we'll ask ChatGPT, or perhaps we'll ask Gemini to answer that question and speculate on that, because this is the best they can do, right? So there's some limitations associated with it. And I think the larger thing you'll find is lack of understanding, lack of specialization, lack of infrastructure, lack of funding, and of course, privacy and legal obligations associated with it, all right? Is it something that would could potentially be used in the future. Yes, it could. Yes, it could. And if I were to speculate on that personally, so for example, in London, they have every square meter of London is basically covered by from 5 different angles by cameras, and all of this data is fed into a central repository where they have multiple deep learning algorithms extracting that into large language models so that it could be used by security services and police services. It does have an impact on privacy though, right? So perhaps that's something to consider, right? So there's my speculative answer. Can you advise of free, reliable AI apps which are safe to use for government officials? I think if you have subscriptions to AI services like AWS, so if you have a subscription to the AWS AI services, they are secure to use because data is encrypted, not only at rest but also in transit, and your data is not used to train other machine learning models. The same is going to be true for things like Azure AI services. The same will be true for things like Google AI services. I would be very careful and look at the SLAs associated with those. But those are all paid for services. Free services are a language model that you've built using OpenAI services, or language model or a bot that you've built using your own LLM services, where you maintain the data in your own vector database. Those are also safe and secure, bearing in mind that this data would then not be publicly accessible. This data would not be able to be searched from the internet. It would be searched from your own AI assistant that you've built, and point to your local data repository. So there are free AI services. I, for example, would be loath to use something like a free version of a Chinese AI service. Okay, and not that I have anything against Chinese people individually, but we have to remember that the Chinese government is notoriously known for scraping data. So I'd be very loath to use something like that. If it's a paid service, and I know the service encrypts data and at rest and in transit, then that's maybe something that I would consider. So for data with a high degree of privacy and a high degree of security associated with it, I would certainly try my best to steer clear of too many free services. Okay. Can add an egg to the life cycle, as there needs to be potential first before learning can start. Yeah, absolutely. And what you'll find, if I were to use, let's just take Napkin over here, right? And you'll notice, and I think what I try to do is I try to show a little bit about policy development. So there's no restriction on what can be done. So if I wanted to go ahead and add my own section, or add a comment and regenerate my description or my image, you can certainly do that. Remember, at the end of the day, this is a tool, and this tool is there for you to use. But the tool is not there for you to put, if I had to put my life on the line, I would not put my life on the line with an AI generated content. All right. It is content that I would review. It is content that I would continuously review and continuously analyze. And if necessary, I would make the appropriate changes. All right. And that's only with something like Napkin AI. You can, of course, very easily, most of the AI services have the capability to do that. So if you sit over here, for example, let's just do something simple. you'll notice sort of something I generated a little bit earlier, why it matters, example, answer questions, and blah, 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 blah. Can you provide a case study example? So based on the data that we have received, we can provide a case study. What tools can help in problem identification? All right, and we can go ahead and ask that question and get additional guidance. All right, and nothing prevents me from taking this, updating my source document, and then having that source document act as the foundation for future presentations that I need to do. All right. Okay, and the great thing about what is a problem tree analysis example? Oh, let's try this. Can you put this information into a image for me? All right, and that's just Microsoft Copilot. You know, all of the AI assistants have this, and all of the AI assistants do it to a lesser or greater extent. All right, and hopefully that will generate an image for me. I must admit that I'm not particularly enamored with the way that that Microsoft Copilot does it. I mean, it does the job, of course. But in my humble opinion, Gemini AI is a great tool for this. Napkin AI is an amazing AI tool that we can use. And in some cases, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and not only generate an image, but we want to generate an animated image. Or perhaps we want to generate something based on source text, and we want it to be animated and deploy that to our YouTube channel. Or maybe we want to deploy that to our e-learning channel. So what a lot of people don't know about NetCampus is part of what we do is we do a little bit of facilitation, a little bit. That's what we're busy with now. But we also do a lot of training. Training, of course, is a lot different because it's over an extended period of time. We can then allow much more human interaction because of the lack of time constraint. But something else that we do is a lot of consulting work. And one of our very large clients has us creating e-learning content for the products that they sell. How to use the product, how to care for the product, and that kind of thing. And they use this extensively for training their service staff. Right now, in the past, this used to be a pain to do because there's a lot of editing and there's a lot of video record. Guys, what we do these days, and there are many services for this, but here we have something called InVideo AI. Right. And I'm just refreshing it. It's been idle for a long time, so I'm concerned that it might have signed me out. And we can give a topic, premise, and detailed instruction in any language, and then what we could potentially do is generate a video clip for that. Of course, this is all dependent on the prompt, on the question, on what you ask it to do. Okay. So there's a comment here that I just like to look at quickly. Uploading documents on AI like Copilot, etc., is not posing a security risk or exposing the department's vulnerability. I'm going to say it depends. It depends, of course. It depends on the AI assistant that you're using and the reputation of the organization. It depends largely on their ethics, on their security commitment. But as a general rule, I would say that your typical co-pilots like Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, which is OpenAI services, it's true. It's true. But I would be loath and I would be careful of using AI services for which I have not done the appropriate research. All right. So if there was a AI service that was offered by NetCampus as an example, we have AI services that we offer. Here's an amazing AI service that we offer, right? There's a new student, or there's a student, and part of the adoption of artificial intelligence is understanding the impact that it's going to have on you as an individual and on your work, right? And many organizations, far too few, I understand that people are going to need to be reskilled, right? So now I'm a software developer, and I've developed software my entire life. And now I need to reskill, but I don't know where to start. Right. So there's an AI service. I can ask it to do an assessment. I can ask it to create a learning path and a learning plan for me. And it will output that and create the course and the content and all of those wonderful things. How do you know it's not sharing this with millions of other people? Okay, that's the question. How do you know? So the answer is it depends on the AI service that you're utilizing. It depends on their commitment to privacy and security. But if you're using a no-name service which you can't establish a reputation for, I'd be quite concerned about that. Okay. So next question. Based on history/precedence, with what average percentage will the staff complement be? Okay. Be reduced when employees are fully competent on AI-enabled technologies. You are probably not going to find a definitive answer to that particular question. And part of the reason you're not going to find a definitive answer to that particular question is because AI is, even though it's been around for a long time, AI is still in its infancy. Right. So we can't speculate as to what impact it is going to have in the future. But from my perspective, let me tell you a little bit about my role and the role of some of my colleagues, and why myself and many of my colleagues are quite sensitive about the topic of AI, and perhaps why many people in our organization are resistant to the adoption of AI. All right. So previously, in my role as let's do first as a trainer. Okay. So as a trainer, I've always been used to deliver content. Okay. And the content that I've delivered has always been assembled and curated by somebody higher up in the organization responsible for content development and content creation. All right. So the person responsible for content development and content creation, because we run so many different training courses, we used to have a whole team of people responsible for doing that. Okay. But now we find that those people can do their job a lot easier with the vast variety of AI tools that are available. Okay. And that impacts the number of people that we employ. Not only does it impact the number of people that we employ, but it also impacts further down the line to the facilitators that we have. Because many of the curriculums that we develop and many of the courses that we train can relatively easily be translated into self-study. So no facilitator intervention required. Now, will that impact facilitators? Will that impact those that create the content? Yes, of course it does. Of course it will. As to what percentage, I don't want to speculate. But there's an upside to this as well. All right. The upside to this is that you, as an individual working in any organization, you have so much more potential now. You can very easily learn new skills, and many organizations are looking at reskilling people within the organization to be able to better leverage artificial intelligence services. Right. So that's my fence-sitting answer. Of course, there is going to be an impact, but ultimately it's up to you as to what that impact is going to be. The way that I always describe it to people, I think artificial intelligence is a bus, and that bus is coming down the road, right? And you're standing on the side of the road. So you have basically two choices. You can flag down the bus and get on it, okay? Or you can let the bus go you by. Okay. Me, I flag down the bus and I'm happy to get on the bus. So this means learning more about artificial intelligence, learning more about effective creation of prompts. Because by the same token, many job numbers will reduce. But the potential of AI to create many more jobs is also there. All right. Here's an example. Being able to create a assistant or a machine learning algorithm that can better understand viewing preferences or internet browsing preferences and present you with the content that you desire rather than a lot of content that is irrelevant. Okay. So not the answer you're looking for, but the answer I'm comfortable giving. When last did I visit a police station? They still take statements with pen and paper. Antoinette, believe it or not, I visited the police station on Friday. Okay. And yes, even though the officer happened to be a captain, was very friendly and very, very helpful, I had to take my own black pen and I had to sit and complete my own form with my own handwriting. So absolutely, I know that that is the case. But having said that, just because something isn't working or something isn't as effective or is as efficient as it should be, doesn't mean that we should leave it that way. Right? This is a great opportunity for us to improve. This is a great opportunity for us to come up with a solution which we can present to the powers that be. Right? And my job, of course, is not to come up with that particular solution, but my job is to ensure that the powers that be are aware of the capabilities of AI. So I'm very aware that it's all still paper-based. All right, next question from Mr. iPhone. How can natural language processing be effectively leveraged to personalize learning? That's something that we actually do. We have a learning solution. I can't necessarily share the learning solution with you because it is something that we rebrand and repackage. But this learning solution does use machine learning, natural language processing, deep learning. It uses a variety of AI techniques to be able to determine what your current level of skill is, the gap that exists between your current level of skill and the skill that is required, or objectively required, to be able to perform a certain set of functions, and then dynamically create a learning path for you that differs from the learning path of perhaps your colleague who has a different set of skills or a different level of skill based on their assessment. So those tools are available, and we, as a matter of fact, use those tools extensively when it comes to consulting with one of our clients, one of our large clients. I can't tell you who it is, but it's a very large retailer. What they wanted to do is they wanted to upskill 100 data scientists, right? And it's nonsensical to create a learning program for potential 100 data scientists. That's the same. So what we did is we used this artificial intelligence system to do things like assessing the level of linear algebra associated with each individual, assessing a variety of features, and then creating a custom learning path for each. Some learning paths were 3 months in length, and some learning paths were 12 months in length. Some had 3 or 4 different programs, and some of them had 10 or 20 different programs, right? For us, the importance was to, we often say that different people learn differently and learn at a different pace, but we tend to give everybody the exact same learning program. What a ridiculous concept. So yes, we do use those AI services in one of the products that we offer our customers. What safeguards should be in place when deploying large language models to support public sector training, particularly to ensure accuracy, data privacy, and alignment with government policy and ethics? So I think the safeguards are the typical safeguards that I would be concerned about. The first one would be data security. All right. Whether the large language models that we are using whether that maintains the integrity and the security of the data. Remember, we might be collecting huge volumes of data. And some of this data that we're collecting, and for example, if I look at InVideo AI over here, one of the first things that it did when I subscribed to the AI service was ask me about my personal information and about including that personal information in its large language model. So that's one of my main concerns. So the safeguards that you have to put in place are all going to be policy driven, right? And not only are they going to be policy driven, because at the end of the day, policy has to be translated into practical application. So how, not only that we agree that we will keep data private, but how are we going to keep that data private, and who is going to have access to that data? Okay, so that's I'm happy to discuss that in much further detail. We don't have too much time for that. Okay, no worry about. I was just sorry, didn't have time to register, so just use the device. I see that private sector has jumped on the AI bandwagon already in the healthcare and banking sector, and AI agents taking. See that the opportunities in public sector, the repetitive tasks, where do you see the opportunities in the public sector for the implementation of AI agents? Okay, just off the top of my head, let me give you a really good example. Okay, so I owned a property in Midrand. Don't know where you guys are from, but Midrand is, well, it's called Midrand because it's basically in the middle of Johannesburg and Pretoria is the Midrand area. I owned a property there. I sold the property in 2007. Transfer of the property took place on the 19th of November 2007. Okay. Can you believe that the city of Joburg sent me a statement of account a couple of days ago, a rates and taxes statement of account. And this rates and taxes statement of account claims that I owe them 22,000 blah, 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 and some change in backdated rates and taxes. So here's my question. How can property transfer even take place if there's outstanding rates and taxes at the time of the sale of the property? Okay, there's a perfect example of how artificial intelligence can be used, right? Because that's clearly not possible. The documentation is there somewhere at the city of Joburg, and I phoned the city of Joburg 20 times since I received the documentation claiming that I owe them money. Here's another example of artificial intelligence being leveraged. Why don't they have a chatbot that I can interact with? Because I phoned the city of Joburg last week, Wednesday. I was online for half an hour and nobody picked up the call from the queue. Okay. So, I mean, there are innumerable instances in which we could use artificial intelligence to make the lives of our constituents that much easier. Right. So I would encourage you to start thinking in terms of that. Okay. So I just saw another one. The world has recently seen Grok AI. Okay, I must apologize because it's not like I use Grok AI myself, but I can look at the rest of it being used to indicate that there is white genocide in South Africa. So a simple way to determine if there's genocide is to see if a particular population group is increasing in size or decreasing in size. Because genocide seems to indicate that it should be a decreasing population and not an increase. White genocide in South Africa, how much data or for how long is it generally take to teach AI-enabled technologies? I think the question is maybe a little bit broader than that. So if you don't mind, if I can maybe try to rephrase it, and just rephrase it into how much data or time does it generally take to train AI-enabled technologies, in particular, like Grok? Okay. Yeah, I think it's broken down into a number of different stages. Okay. So stage number one would be the acquisition of data. Okay. So any type of artificial intelligence system is trained on hundreds of billions of trillions of tokens, where a token is a conversion of a word into a number and then ultimately saved into a vector database. It's a little bit more complex than that, because not only is it turning words into numbers, but ultimately it's relating different numbers to other numbers that are typically used together. So it depends on the size of the resources that are available and the diversity of the resources, like books and websites and code repositories and that type of thing, right? And then it is also based on not only the acquisition of the data, but also the curation of the data, right? What I mean with the curation of the data, filtering out harmful content, filtering out low quality or biased content, right? And that's not always perfect, by the way. Okay, and this might in particularly be the case with Grok reporting white genocide. You know, what do they base the definition of white genocide on? Personally, I think in South Africa, generally speaking, not generally speaking, specifically speaking, there isn't a single population group that is exempt from crime, right? So that might be something. It might be the scale of the data that they're collecting. Perhaps they're collecting data from only a single source. Perhaps the single source data is biased. I'm not saying it is, because I don't know Grok AI, but perhaps it is. Perhaps they collected the data from multiple sources but didn't curate the data appropriately. Okay, so that's the first problem, is the data requirements itself. The second problem is the training time. Okay, because pre-training data, certainly if you want if you want it to be accurate, it can take weeks. It can take months, and not only can it take weeks and months, it's going to use massive amounts of GPU, so massive amounts of data, right? Of course, you can train the data within an hour or within a day. But then it's going to bring into question the veracity of the data, right? Whether the data is actually accurate or not. Okay. Yeah. Poor quality data. I just like to highlight, it's not only about the quality of the data, but it is also about the quantity and the variety of sources of the data. So this is actually a really good question, and a really great opportunity to talk about the dependency of AI on the data. So remember, when we spoke about big data, we said that big data had these initially 3 V's, but it turns out that there are many more V's. We spoke about the volume of the data. The greater the volume of the data that's being generated and stored, in other words, terabytes or petabytes of data, that's much better than a small amount of data. The variety of the data, not only the different types of data, but the different sources of data. The more sources we have for data, the more accurate the prediction is going to be, right? It's also about the veracity of the data, where we talk about the accuracy and the quality, and the trustworthiness of the data. You know, data, for example, that is published by Stats SA is much more accurate, in my humble opinion and experience, than data made available by a private organization like a political party, for example, the EFF, or a social organization like, for example, AfriForum. So the veracity of the data is also crucially important, right? So this means is that we have to train our machine learning algorithms on big data and not on a small subset of data. My wife is an accountant. Okay, she's not an accountant. She's a financial director at a very large organization, and she has to make crucial financial decisions every day. Okay, and those crucial financial decisions impact not only the bottom line of her organization, but impacts literally the tens of thousands of people that they employ. If she makes a bad decision because she has too little data, or she has inaccurate data, or she has biased data, this impact is felt by everybody in the organization, right? So that's my answer. That's my answer to that question. I don't know Grok AI, so I am loath to speculate on what they reported, but I didn't look. But I would say that big data is the fundamental building block of anything AI related, right? So if you look at a small subset of data, you can basically have your small subset of data say anything. Okay. There we go. So I tried my best to run through most of those questions, if not all of those questions. I tried to give you short and concise answers. Perhaps not exactly the answer that you wanted, but I'm very happy to engage with you at a later stage as well. We really unfortunately have very very limited time available. Okay, so now that we've done that, perhaps what we can do is we can go and look again, or further explore some of the use cases of artificial intelligence. And this time around, allow me just to close all the windows that my screen is still being shared, right? Yes, perfect. I think it is. So I want to show you another AI service that could be quite useful. Sorry, that was not it. I think I might have it in my AI utilities over here, and I have a great AI utility called Hyperwrite. Okay, so this is something that I introduced to my daughter, as a matter of fact. And Hyperwrite I found to be quite useful when it comes to creating research projects. So my daughter is at university. She's fortunate enough that my wife earns a good salary, and my wife can send her to university. Of course, as a facilitator, other facilitators on the call will attest to this. We're not paid particularly well, but what I want to do is let me just show you what you could potentially do. And then I'll show you the caveat there too as well. So there are many AI services that are available. And now I'm just talking for the sake of talking, because I'm looking for a document. Just excuse me while I find it. Oh my goodness. Okay, I found it. Okay, I found it. All right. So like I was saying, my daughter's at varsity, and she's doing her honors now. Next year, she's going to do a master's, and her honors is a research project. And I don't know anything about her research project. Honestly, I studied law. She studied BSc, but her research project is associated with pain receptors in mole rats. Okay. And as part of the research project, I wanted to help her as best I can. But of course, I don't know too much about mole rats. So I sat with her and I asked her some questions, and she had to submit a research paper and do a presentation. So I thought it would be quite nice if I could help her, structure the research paper, get references and that type of thing. And I asked a number of artificial intelligence bots to help me. I asked Microsoft Copilot, I asked Gemini, I asked ChatGPT, and some others. And all of them gave me a basic outline, but none of them gave me anything specific that we could use. And part of the reason for that, is I think it has to do with GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. And then I did a pretty good search on the internet, and I found something called Hyperwrite. All right. So Hyperwrite has a number of tools that are available, and these tools are 95% of these tools are AI-assisted tools, right? So you can see over there are tools for writing, there are tools for education, and each of these indicates a specific AI type of tool that we can leverage to do something useful for us. So the one that I wanted is, I wanted to find if there was a research paper tool. So simply by entering research paper, I have a research paper writer, I have a summarizer. If I had somebody else's research paper that I wanted to investigate, thesis statement builder. So you can see there are quite a number of tools. Now, again, these AI services are available, and don't for a moment believe that you're not going to be using them. And don't for a moment believe that your target audience is not going to be using them. Okay, I don't, as a matter of fact, believe that your target audience should not be using AI services. The ultimate goal for me, and people like me and people like you, is to ensure that we raise awareness, is to ensure that we put people in a better position where they can make better decisions in the future, right? So whether they use AI as the tool that to assist them with that or not is not really relevant to me. At the end of the day, this is going to be submitted to a board, and the board is going to analyze it, and the board is going to score it. So you still need to know what's going on. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to show you the capability to go ahead and create a research paper. So I have some information that my daughter gave me that I would be able to put into this research paper writer for me. Okay, so there's some of the information. This was just the topic of conversation, right? So this was the topic of a research project. And then there's a thesis statement. So she wrote out this thesis statement. And the thesis statement, of course, is a better description of what it is she wants the research paper to include. And then she wanted it to be divided into a number of key points. Okay, so let's see what this generates. And of course, this is using a number of large language models in the background. What's a large language model? The entirety of the information that is made accessible to the AI engine, right? So if you've created a large language model that's private in nature and is going to be consumed by an AI service that was created for the South African Police Services, this AI model would then be private to the South African Police Services. This is an AI model or a large language model that is based on hundreds of thousands, no, I dare say hundreds of millions of research papers that have been that have gone before. So key points. Let's say I want an introduction. All right. I think I can have a shift over there. And a typical research paper is going to have, let's add a methods section. All right. And then maybe what we'll also do is we'll have a results. Whoops. And let's do point number 3. We'll have like a results section in our research paper. So what else? I'm just trying to remember. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head what we included. And then point number 4 over here. What we're going to do is we're going to have our discussion. Discussion. I think that's how you would spell it. And then point number 5 over there. Typically with a research paper, we're going to have. Let's see this, acknowledgements. And then what we'll also do is we'll go ahead and we'll add a references section. Okay. It's been a little bit of time, but assist in writing a research paper by generating content based on the given topic. Please, let's see. Okay, now the great thing about this, no, crumbs. This was the free version that I used. If I have no credits remaining, let's see, $19 a month. So I mean, you might consider this to be expensive, but at the end of the day, trust me, the amount of time and effort that goes into a research project, this will at least give me the outline thereof. It's a pity, but these services are all available. And some of the amazing things about these services is there is also an AI checker. So any research project that was created with an AI service like this can be checked by an AI service to determine how much and if it was created by an AI service, and then will allow you to make changes to that AI service. Oh, there's Antoinette, thank you. Jenny.ai is also great for research. There are many of these tools that are really amazing for research. But it takes me back to I spoke a little bit earlier of a presentation that I attended, and the presenter created it with AI, and knew everything about the presentation, but couldn't speak to anything outside of the presentation. This is a great tool to use to help you create the presentation, to help you create the paper, but it is still up to you to understand the paper and make the modifications and validate the information that it sends you. Because very often, AI doesn't like to say that it doesn't know what the answer is, right? So sometimes it grasps at straws and it gives you answers that are not accurate. Sometimes it even misinterprets your question and provides you with an answer for that misinterpreted question. So this brings me to probably what we will call our final set of our final set of slides. Okay, we often refer to this as prompting, and prompting is really just me asking questions of some type of AI service. And there are a couple of best practices that perhaps I can share with you, things that I've learned, whether I'm speaking to Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Napkin.ai, or any of those AI services. First and foremost, okay, be clear and specific. Right. If you have to ask a complex question, summarize the complex question and perhaps provide bullet points. Right. And be clear and specific as to what the result is that you want to see. If you want to see the result in table format, be specific in your prompt. Ask specifically for it to format it in table format. All of the AI services can do this. As a matter of fact, we can take something that we've generated with Microsoft Copilot in Word. We can have it in bullet point. We can ask it to transform it into a table. We can even ask it to transform it into an index when you need to click on it to expand it. Those are some of the options that are available. So be clear and precise in what you require, and be clear and the question that you require answered, and be clear and precise in the output that you expect. It's always good to provide context. Okay. So for example, if I'm sitting over here, let me use this over here, okay, and let me go ahead and create a new email. All right, let's do something like that, and then you'll notice in my new email I have Microsoft Copilot, and I want Copilot to help me draft an email. So what I mean with provide context, if I were to send you an email, I might say something like, say something like, write a business email to thank attendees to today's AI session. All right. I want to be a little bit more precise and say when the AI session was, but I think that there was only one AI session for me today. So that's what I mean with provide context. Yes, you can do that, but perhaps a better way of doing that was to do this. Let's try to create a second draft, and we'll create a much better prompt. We'll say something like, write a professional email to attendees apologizing for the brief answers I provided during the Q&A. This was due to time constraints. Okay, and then we can go ahead and we can generate that. Okay, so which one of those prompts is better? For me, the prompt that was better was the professional email over there. I think that prompt was probably better, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to keep that one. All right. So not only do you have to be clear and specific in the question you ask, as well as the format in which you expect the answer, but you also have to provide context so the AI system can use that context in the answer. I also think that when it comes to using AI services like this, I also think that it's important for us to provide step-by-step instructions. Okay. First, explain the idea. So break the complex idea into smaller parts. Then you first explain the concept. Okay. Then you give an example. And then finally, you summarize that in one sentence. It helps the AI structure its response more logically. Right. So that's certainly something that I would encourage you to do. Explain like you're a child. All right, explain to the AI service as if you're a child. All right. Okay. If you want a response to come back and speak in terms of general terms of the layman, then tell it that you need the response to come back as if you are a 10-year-old, as if you are a layman. Okay, as if you are, or if you are an engineer, then tell it you want the response to come back the way that an engineer would expect it to be presented. The same is going to apply if you're going to create a research paper. If you're going to use ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is you're going to use, you can't just talk about the pain receptors in mole rats. You have to say, provide context. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Pretoria. My thesis is on mole rats. I would like you to create a scientific paper or a scientific essay associated with blah, 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 and be very specific, provide points, say go, and you're going to get the result that you expect. All right. So you have to be specific in the way that you ask the question, explain it like whatever, right? Iterate and refine. That's my, what is that? Probably the fifth piece of advice that I can give you. Okay. The first answer is going to be a good answer, but it's perhaps not the answer that you want. It's perhaps too general. It's perhaps too specific. It perhaps lacks a specific topic. Right, like somebody mentioned, let's just add something, or I think it was referred to as an egg. There's something that happens before that. That's fantastic. Get the question, get the answer, and then say something to the effect of, thank you, that was a great answer. Could you also include the following in your answer? And insert this before the following heading. Ask the question again, get the result again. It's an iterative process. I think it's like everything in life. Everything in life is an iterative process, right? Perhaps you want to make it shorter. Perhaps you want to add some more technical detail. Perhaps you've generated it in English, but the target audience is going to be German. So maybe I want to translate it into German. Right. That's certainly a second, third, fourth, fifth iteration of the same work. Okay. When you create a prompt, when you create a question, something else that I've learned is to give examples. Okay. So I might, for example, want to create a course curriculum associated with artificial intelligence. So I might give an example of I need three-day training courses, starting with a beginner level training course, a intermediate level training course, and an advanced level training course. Right? Start like that. So there I give examples of, so that AI or my AI service can use those examples to create the content. That will be my first iteration. My second iteration might then be to take the beginner training course detail and ask it to expand on that detail until eventually I end up with the entire course content for that particular item. Right. Of course, we can then take that, put that into Word. We can translate it using generative AI into a PowerPoint presentation. And then we can use the generative AI capability in PowerPoint to add images to slides, to insert more slides, to insert speaker notes. Those are the capabilities that we have. But I always find that it's useful when prompting an AI service to give examples of what I would like to receive. Okay, and role play. So there's been, and I know of course why, but let's try this. Okay, that was Hyperwrite. That was a bit of a fail. Let's go ahead and grab hold of. Let me just use Copilot. Copilot is what I'm most familiar with. So what I mean with role play is I can do this, and I can say create a security policy. Okay. Create a security policy. So I can do that, right? And it'll give me a little bit of a rundown. This is not a good prompt, my friend. To tailor your needs, could you clarify a few things? Okay. So now I'm going to role play, and I'm going to say, I am the CIO of Absa Bank. I have been tasked to, I have been see, I'm Afrikaans, with the creation of a specific network security policy for the bank. Okay. I'm not too worried about the spelling because it will be able to interpret it. Because when it comes to writing data into a vector database, it doesn't do it on the individual character level, but on the word and the context of the word. So I'm the CIO of Absa Bank. I have been tasked with the creation of a network security policy. Please assist with the creation, placing specific emphasis. Okay. Now, remember I said something about point format. So what I want to do is I want to have that point format over there. Okay. Or a combination. What kind of security are you? Okay, so we'll do that. And we'll do that. I think this is a much better prompt than simply trying to create a security policy. Right. It's a bit more specific. I'm providing a lot of information. What I haven't done is I haven't asked it to output it in any particular format. Output this into a strategic document to be used by the executive group, or the IT steering committee, or whatever. All right. So that's much more precise. And now we're going to get something that is much more beneficial and much more usable. Now you can decide what you want to do with this. For example, I like what they've done. Would you like that in a formatted into a PDF or a Word document? So I'm going to say, oh, look at that, find all your legal. So we're going to say, please output this into a PDF. Okay, and now I have my PDF. Perhaps that wasn't good enough. What we might do is we might say, this was a great first attempt, but I noticed you did not include stakeholder analysis. Is that how you spell analysis? Please add this using, well, let's just please add this. Okay, again, people laugh when I say please, but hey, I think I might as well be friendly, right? And there's a stakeholder analysis. Key stakeholders involved in implementation, oversight, compliance of the policy. And there we go. And it did it in table format. So I didn't quite like that. Please output this stakeholder analysis in point format. Okay. No, I don't want you to do that. Okay, sorry. It now went back and told me that it completed the generation of the PDF. I was a little bit too fast for it. So let me just ask it to output that in point form. But there I have my PDF. Okay. So a couple of questions from Antoinette that I think this is the last set of questions we'll take, and then we'll wrap it up quickly. So Antoinette, how do you pay for AI access if your organization does not have a credit card? Also, how do you pick one over the other if you have to follow SCM processes? Okay, the first part thereof. Most organizations that provide you with AI services do so on a subscription basis. Okay. So if you are already subscribed to Microsoft Azure, or you subscribe to AWS, or the Google Cloud Platform, or maybe you subscribe to the Alibaba Cloud, they all provide cloud AI services as part of your subscription. If you have a subscription with them, you already have payment terms associated with it. Generally speaking, it is more about your internal processes and ensuring that your internal processes are followed so that you can obtain access to the AI services. Right. So if we're talking about a private individual like me, I have a credit card that I don't like using online. So I have a virtual credit card that's linked to it because it gives me a little bit more control. And generally speaking, you can subscribe using a virtual credit card. If your organization does not have an AI, does not have a cloud subscription, or they don't have in the case of Microsoft, they don't have an Office 365 subscription, which I'm sure they do. And if they don't have a credit card, then the answer is you don't. Okay. You don't access a paid for service if you can't pay for the paid for service. And most of them require credit cards to be able to use. Right. I would say if you are using Office 365, from my experience, many government departments have an agreement of understanding with Microsoft, or already have a subscription with Microsoft that includes an E5 license. And an Office E5 license gives you access to everything Office related. And on top of that, they have added Copilot. So just check. Many organizations already have Copilot. People just haven't activated it or know that they have licenses for Copilot. Okay, it's honestly true. When the AI revolts, those that do not say please and thank you, you will be the first ones to be targeted. I tend to agree with you in that regard. Better be friendly. You never know. You never know. Right. So look at that. Here's the PowerPoint slide. I didn't quite want the PowerPoint slide, but it did create a stakeholder analysis. Let's have a look at this. I'm wondering what it actually looks like. And then if we open that, okay, that's not particularly useful. Let's enable editing, and let's go ahead and ask Copilot. Take this slide and insert an image representing a stakeholder map onto slide 2. Okay. This is just to show you that, I didn't quite ask the question correctly. I want a typical stakeholder map with 4 quadrants and each stakeholder mapped on those 4 quadrants. So I didn't ask the question exactly right. I should have said something like that. But what it is going to do, at least, is based on its understanding of the question, it's going to go ahead and create that image for me. And it should give me the ability to insert that into another slide. By the way, I've been showing you Microsoft Copilot and a lot of Microsoft Copilot because this is a Microsoft sponsored event. That's not quite what I wanted at all. But that's because my prompt was formatted badly. But things like Google Docs will have Gemini embedded in it. Right, so you can use Gemini as well. I think I have the free version of Gemini, but there is a professional and professional plus version of Gemini as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That's all we have time for. I try to do 3 things. I kind of tried to do the 3 things in sequence, but there was some overflow. The first thing I tried to do was just generally talk about AI and the AI technologies that are out there and how they relate to each other. To highlight that, I drew a diagram that looked something like that, and it was intersected with some PowerPoint and then also some demonstrations using different AI services, such as Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Napkin AI, and maybe one or two others. All right. The second thing I tried to do is I tried to show you some specific use cases for AI. I did so by using the AI services to generate content for me, using the generative AI capability, manipulating that content. And while I was doing that, I was also trying to show you my thought process behind it. And I think what it boils down to at the end of the day is AI is a tool and you have to use it as a tool. Just like a firearm is a tool. Okay, there's no firearm on planet Earth that has ever killed anybody. It's only people that kill people. All right. So it's the way that you use the tool that is going to be important. If you abuse or misuse the tool, if you don't ask it the appropriate questions, it's not going to give you the appropriate answer. Remember, you still have to take accountability and responsibility for what you present. So the AI service will output for you, but at the end of the day, you have to present it. Okay. Should you declare usage in drafting your paper? Yes, I think you should. I think you should. Right. I think if we go ahead and we look at some type of, let's look at something that I created with AI. And if we go all the way back to the beginning over here, you'll notice that the AI AI generated content, well, firstly, it says it might be incorrect, but at least we say that it was leveraged. I think it's like if you create any document, any research paper, you want to cite your references. So I think Bandile, I think you're absolutely right. I think you should cite it. That way you're not caught off guard when somebody challenges you, right? So I think that's a good idea. So firstly, we had to look at some of the AI technologies and AI terms and definitions, and then we wanted to look at how we can practically use that to solve problems. Then we went into answering a whole bunch of questions, of course, okay? And the whole bunch of questions, there were quite a few of them, and it took us a little bit of time. The third thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to talk specifically about policy design, policy development, and curriculum design and development. And we didn't quite get to exactly that, but I believe that what we did in the previous two topics, we would be able to apply directly into policy design as well as curriculum development. I did use some examples as I was using the AI services, and I trust that was maybe not enough for you to be able to go and say that I'm now a guru, but maybe it's enough to make you think about how you can use artificial intelligence and these AI services to assist you with that. And finally, I added this just because I needed to. Finally, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to talk a little bit about prompting, right? And prompting is really about getting the AI service to understand, interpret, and respond accurately to the question that you're going to ask. All right. So that's it for me. I hope that it was useful. No, I don't hope. Hope is not a tactic. I trust that it was informative. I trust that it was useful. And perhaps sometime in the future, I will see you on a training course, and I can show you how to build large language models and deploy those large language models. Perhaps I can show you how to create and train machine learning algorithms on top. Perhaps on top of that, I can show you how to create your own agents that will use those machine learning algorithms to look at those large language models. All right. Thank you very much. And that is it from me.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Indeed, a very insightful session that we're having there. And thank you so much to the attendees for attending until this time. We know that your schedule is quite busy, but you allowed us to give out this particular session and learn together. Please feel free to drop us an email if there are some things that you want us to discuss, or some you want us to share this actually online. So please feel free to contact us. We will have another session that is coming up, which is the last session with the Microsoft. That is going to be on the 29th of May. This month. So please feel free, and we will also send those, and then we'll have another person that will actually be chairing the session on that day. Thank you so much, colleagues. Do have a lovely evening. Take care. Cheers.
All right, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.